I grew up in a small town where opportunities were few and far between. My parents were hardworking, but they were also limited by the circumstances of their lives. My dad worked at the local auto shop, and my mom worked as a waitress at a diner. We weren't poor, but we didn't have much either. I remember being a kid and thinking that life was just about surviving, getting by day to day. There wasn't much hope for anything bigger, anything more. But there was one thing I always felt strongly about. I wanted to change my life. I didn't know exactly what that looked like back then, but I always had this idea that I could be better, do better, and eventually achieve more than what was expected of me. I was obsessed with the idea of breaking out of the mold. I knew the only way to do that was to build something of my own. Fast forward a few years, and I found myself in my early 20s, with more debt than I'd like to admit, working a dead-end job in a fast food restaurant. I'd gone to college for a couple of years, but the cost of tuition and the looming uncertainty about what I wanted to do with my life made me drop out. I didn't want to end up like everyone else who worked jobs they hated just to pay bills. At that point, I was frustrated. My friends were settling into their careers, buying new cars, and starting families, while I felt like I was still stuck in a rut. But something clicked one evening while I was working the drive-thru at my fast food job. I had just taken a long order from a customer, and when I handed them their food, they gave me a strange look. I was used to customers being impatient or annoyed, but this person seemed genuinely interested in me. They asked, "So what's your plan for life?" I paused for a second, not really knowing how to answer. It was a question I hadn't really asked myself seriously. The customer must have seen the confusion on my face because they added, "Don't let life pass you by. You have the ability to do something amazing." That short interaction stuck with me. It made me question everything: the job, the path I was on, and most importantly, my own potential. That night, I went home and started researching everything I could about business, entrepreneurship, and startups. I read books, watched videos, and listened to podcasts. It was overwhelming at first, but the more I learned, the more the pieces started to fall into place. I came up with a rough idea for a business, a delivery service that catered to busy professionals who didn't have time to go grocery shopping. I had no idea where to start or how to fund it, but I figured I'd give it a try. After all, I had nothing to lose. I spent the next few weeks working on a business plan while still working my fast food job. It was exhausting, and I often found myself falling asleep at my desk after work. But I didn't care. I knew that if I didn't take this leap now, I never would. The first major hurdle was funding. I didn't have any savings, and I didn't know anyone with deep pockets to help me. I looked into getting a small business loan, but my credit was terrible. So, I turned to crowdfunding. I launched a campaign on a platform like Kickstarter, detailing my idea for the delivery service. To my surprise, people actually donated. It wasn't much at first, but it was enough to get the ball rolling. Next, I needed a website, a logo, and a name. I wasn't a designer, but I used free online tools to piece together a basic site. I called the company QuickCart, a simple name that reflected the business. I knew I couldn't afford to hire professionals, so I did everything myself. I wrote my own copy, shot my own photos, and managed the social media accounts. Once the site was up and running, I started spreading the word. I made flyers and passed them out at local businesses, telling people about QuickCart. The first few months were brutal. No one knew who I was, and no one trusted me to deliver their groceries. I had to build credibility from scratch. I offered discounts to my first customers and worked tirelessly to provide great service. I even went as far as hand-delivering the groceries myself just to ensure everything went smoothly. The turning point came when I managed to land a partnership with a local business, a small health food store. They were skeptical at first, but after I showed them my growing social media presence and how much interest there was in my service, they agreed to give it a shot. That partnership was the first domino to fall. More businesses started reaching out to me, and within a year, I was handling multiple accounts. Business was booming, but I still faced challenges. I didn't have a team, so I had to juggle all aspects of the business by myself. The stress was overwhelming at times, but I didn't let it stop me. I started hiring a small team, drivers, customer service reps, and an accountant. Slowly but surely, I started to build a real company. I expanded the delivery service to cover more areas, and I even started offering new services like meal prep kits and office catering. Every new service brought in new customers. After 2 years, QuickCart was no longer a small side project. It had grown into a full-fledged business. We had dozens of employees, a fleet of delivery vehicles, and contracts with major clients. The best part? I didn't have to work in the fast food restaurant anymore. I could finally afford to pay myself a salary. But even with all the success, I never forgot those early days, the struggle, the self-doubt, and the nights when I questioned whether it was all worth it. I won't lie, building a business wasn't easy. There were many times I thought I was in over my head. But looking back, I see that those challenges were the lessons that made me who I am today. They taught me resilience, problem-solving, and the importance of persistence. Today, QuickCart is a thriving business with plans to expand into new cities. I'm not the same person I was when I started this journey. I've learned that it's not about the size of the company you build, but the passion and dedication you pour into it. The moment you stop caring about what others think and start caring about what you can build, everything changes. I may have started with nothing, but I built something meaningful. And that, more than anything else, is the real success story. Now, I get to mentor young entrepreneurs who are where I was, full of ideas but unsure where to start. I tell them the same thing I wish someone had told me back then. If you're not willing to take risks, you'll never know what you're truly capable of. Life isn't about waiting for the right moment. It's about making the moment right. That customer in the drive-thru didn't just ask me a question. They gave me the push I needed to change everything. You just have to be willing to take the first step. It's been a wild ride, but every struggle and every failure has been worth it. And as I sit here today, looking at my business and the team I've built, I can't help but smile. Because I know that the story isn't over yet. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. I was 23 when I decided to start my first business. I had no prior experience, no mentors, and no idea how I was going to make it work. I had just graduated from college with a degree in English, and I found myself working as a waiter in a small cafe while I figured out my next steps. I was tired of living paycheck to paycheck, and I knew there had to be more to life than this. My dream was to own a business, but I had no clue what kind of business to start or how to even go about it. It all started one evening when I was serving a regular customer at the cafe. He was an older guy, probably in his mid-50s, and he came in nearly every night for dinner. He liked to chat, and over time, we struck up a friendly relationship. One evening, as I took his order, he asked me what my plans were. I told him I was thinking of starting a business, but didn't know where to start. He smiled, leaned back in his chair, and said, "If you want to build a business, you need to solve a problem." That simple piece of advice stuck with me. I spent the next few weeks thinking about it constantly. What problem could I solve? I didn't have a huge network, I didn't have a ton of capital, and I didn't have any high-tech skills. I was just a kid from a small town trying to figure things out. But then, one night, as I was sitting in my cramped apartment scrolling through social media, it hit me. There was a huge problem in the fitness industry. I had always been interested in fitness, and like many people, I had tried various gym memberships over the years. I quickly realized that while most gyms offered memberships, none of them seemed to have a system that truly helped people stay consistent. The memberships were impersonal, expensive, and people were often left to fend for themselves when it came to motivation. Most people would sign up for a gym, go a few times, and then stop. There was no follow-up, no accountability, and no personal touch. The gyms just wanted to take your money and hope you showed up. I saw an opportunity. What if there was a way to combine the best parts of personal training with the accessibility and flexibility of a gym membership? What if I could create an affordable fitness service that focused on motivation, accountability, and individualized progress tracking? That's when I decided to create my first business, a fitness coaching platform. I envisioned a service where people could work with a coach who would help them build a personalized fitness plan, check in with them regularly to ensure they were sticking to it, and provide motivation along the way. I didn't know how to build an app, I didn't have any tech experience, and I definitely didn't have any investors. But I knew one thing. I was going to make this happen. I spent the next several months researching, learning, and taking risks. I scoured the internet for free courses on business development, social media marketing, and anything I could find on starting a fitness business. I spent hours watching YouTube videos and reading articles. I learned how to use basic design tools like Canva to create marketing materials. I also reached out to personal trainers, asking for advice on what would make their job easier. I explained my idea to everyone I met, and slowly, I began to form a network of people who were willing to support me. I also took a huge financial risk. I saved up around $3,000 from my waitressing job, which wasn't much, but it was all I had. I used this money to pay for a basic website and domain, as well as some advertising to get the word out. I didn't even know what I was doing when it came to running Facebook ads, but I figured I'd learn as I went along. The first ad I ran didn't even get a single click, but I didn't give up. I kept tweaking it until I started getting a few leads. But the real challenge came when it was time to scale. I had a handful of clients, but I was still working long hours at the cafe, and I couldn't focus solely on my business. I was exhausted, stressed out, and on the verge of giving up. That's when I decided to take the leap and quit my job. I figured that if I didn't fully commit to my business, it would never grow. So, I handed in my notice and jumped into the unknown. At first, it was rough. I was working from home, trying to build my client base while juggling every other aspect of the business. I would wake up early to respond to emails, spend the afternoons designing marketing materials, and then work late into the night coaching clients and tracking progress. My days were long, and my income was inconsistent. There were weeks when I would go days without making a sale, and I thought about giving up every single day. But something amazing happened along the way. My clients started to see results. They began to share their progress on social media, and people started to take notice. Word of mouth spread, and before I knew it, I was getting more and more referrals. As my client base grew, I decided to invest in a more professional website and hire a team to help with marketing and customer service. I couldn't do everything by myself anymore. By the time I turned 26, my business was doing better than I had ever imagined. I wasn't a millionaire, but I was able to make a comfortable living, and I had built something that people appreciated. I had taken a huge risk, but I learned something important along the way. The key to entrepreneurship isn't necessarily having a big idea. It's about solving a problem and being willing to adapt and grow. I'm still running my business today, and while there have been ups and downs, I wouldn't trade the journey for anything. Looking back, I realized that the most important thing I did was start. I didn't wait for everything to be perfect. I didn't wait for the right moment. I just went for it, and it paid off. If you're thinking about starting a business, my advice is simple. Find a problem to solve, take the leap, and don't give up, no matter how hard it gets. There's no magic formula for success, but there is one thing that will always work: hard work and persistence. I never thought a random conversation at a gas station would lead to me making my first million. And no, this isn't some crypto bro story or a dropshipping course changed my life pitch. It's about garage doors. Yeah, actual garage doors. It all started 3 years ago when I got laid off from my job as a regional sales manager for a commercial lighting company. The pandemic had hit the business hard, and they were downsizing fast. I was in my mid-30s, no kids, divorced, and living in a rental house with barely enough savings to float 6 months. After a week of feeling sorry for myself and crushing too much Netflix, I figured I needed to do something, anything, to make money. I picked up some side gigs: Uber, DoorDash, the usual grind. One night, I pulled into a gas station after a long day, and there was this old guy next to me at the pump, swearing at his phone. Turns out his garage door wouldn't close, and the app wasn't working. I joked, "Man, maybe it just wants to stay open like your secrets." He laughed. We started chatting, and I found out he ran a garage door repair company but was getting too old to do it full-time. That stuck with me. Garage doors? Who fixes those? I Googled it that night. Turns out it's a high-margin, low-competition service business in most areas. Most homeowners have no clue how to fix a spring or install a sensor, and they'll pay good money to have someone else do it. So I did what most irrationally confident unemployed people do. I bought a used work van off Craigslist for $4,000, used YouTube to teach myself the basics of garage door maintenance, and made some cheap business cards through Vistaprint. I called the company Reliable Garage Pros, because every service company I trust seems to be reliable or affordable or fast. It felt like a safe bet. The first few weeks were brutal. I handed out cards at hardware stores, posted in local Facebook groups, and even taped flyers to mailboxes. Yes, it's probably illegal. No, I don't recommend it. I didn't get a single job for the first 19 days. Then finally, someone from Facebook Messenger messaged me and said their garage door wouldn't close all the way. I charged $75 to realign the sensors. Took me an hour because I was nervous and second-guessing everything. But the guy was so grateful, he tipped me $20 and posted in the neighborhood group that I did a great job. That post was the real break. Suddenly, I was getting 2 or 3 messages a day, then 5. Within 2 months, I was booked a week out. I reinvested everything into better tools, uniforms with my logo, and a basic website with booking capability. The best decision I made early on was recording every customer interaction in a spreadsheet, what service they needed, what I charged, how long it took. Patterns started forming. Spring replacements were my bread and butter. They were fast, simple, and I could charge $200, $300 for an hour's work. I also realized most people who needed garage door help didn't just need a fix. They often needed maintenance, insulation, or full replacements. Upselling wasn't even hard when you were honest, and they liked you. By the end of year 1, I made just over $110,000 in revenue. Net profit was about $62,000. Not mind-blowing, but way more than I expected as a solo operator. I was still doing most of the work myself, but now I had enough reviews, a Google business profile, and some SEO traction to look legit. Year 2, I hired my first tech, a 23-year-old kid named Jalen who had done maintenance work for a property management company. I trained him, paid him $20 an hour to start, and took on more jobs. I also found a local call center that answered phones and scheduled appointments for me during the day, which made me look way more professional. We scaled fast. I spent more on Google ads and tested out Nextdoor ads, which were surprisingly effective. I even got into a few home warranty networks. We went from 2 to 4 techs, and I stopped doing actual service calls unless we were slammed. My role became sales, logistics, and managing customer satisfaction. By the end of year 2, revenue was $487,000. Profit, after paying techs and ads, was $183,000. I moved out of my rental and bought a modest house in the same neighborhood where I got that first job. Fitting, right? But it wasn't all smooth. In year 3, one of my techs dropped a garage door panel on a customer's Tesla. My insurance covered it, but our premiums tripled. Another guy quit and tried to start his own reliable garage business 2 blocks away. At first I panicked, thinking he'd undercut me. But I had brand equity by then. People recognized my vans, the uniforms, the stickers we put on repaired units. He didn't last. This year, we passed $1.2 million in revenue, and we're projecting $1.6 million. We have 8 full-time techs, a dispatcher, and a small office with a warehouse for parts. I don't touch tools anymore. I spend most of my time refining our processes, tweaking our ad spend, and training new hires. We've started doing garage door installs for new construction homes and apartment complexes. That's where the real money is. Sometimes I think about that random night at the gas station and how everything pivoted from a casual conversation. If I hadn't talked to that guy, I'd probably still be delivering sushi or sitting through endless Zoom interviews for jobs I didn't want. Here's what I learned. People overthink business ideas. It doesn't need to be sexy. It needs to solve a real problem. Learning a high demand. Low supply trade is basically printing money if you're halfway decent with people. Don't be afraid to start alone. But scale fast once demand justifies it. Brand matters more than you think, even in boring industries. And finally, you don't need to change the world with your business. Sometimes just fixing a garage door and doing it really damn well is enough. So yeah, my $1 million idea? It wasn't tech. It wasn't some disruptive platform. It was springs, rollers, motors, and making sure people could get their cars out in the morning. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. I started my first real business by accident. I never had a grand vision or a pitch deck. I wasn't trying to change the world. I was just a broke 29-year-old trying to pay rent. This all started 5 years ago. I was laid off from my job at a mid-sized marketing agency. The company got acquired, and our department was deemed non-essential. I was given a 2-week severance and a LinkedIn endorsement I never asked for. I had about $800 in my bank account, no real savings, and $34,000 in student loans. Rent was due in 11 days. I applied to everything I could find, but I wasn't getting bites. Out of desperation, I posted on Craigslist offering freelance digital marketing services, SEO, Facebook ads, content strategy. I priced myself low, embarrassingly low, like $15/hour low. I figured anything was better than driving for Uber again. I got 2 clients within the first week. One was a guy selling handmade furniture on Etsy. The other ran a tutoring service. I helped the first with product descriptions and ad targeting, the second with his Google My Business setup and a few blog posts. It wasn't glamorous, but I pulled in $600 that week. More importantly, I realized I could survive without a boss. Over the next 2 months, I went from surviving to slightly thriving. I upped my rates to $25/hour, then $35. I started offering monthly retainers instead of hourly work. I bought a used Herman Miller chair off Facebook Marketplace for $180, which felt like my first real investment. The turning point came when a local pet grooming chain reached out after seeing one of my Reddit posts. I had written a guide on local SEO for small businesses. It wasn't fancy, just something I posted in r/small business to help others and maybe attract a few leads. The owner messaged me and asked if I could help them rank higher on Google Maps. That $750/month retainer turned into a year-long contract, and it gave me some breathing room. I started specializing in local service businesses. Landscapers, dentists, auto shops, therapists. I built a simple formula: Google My Business optimization, review strategy, basic SEO, and lighted spend. I wasn't the best marketer in the world, but I was consistent, affordable, and communicative. That was enough for small business owners who were too busy unclogging drains or filing insurance paperwork to deal with digital stuff. By year 1, I had about 12 retainer clients and was bringing in $8K/month. I hired my cousin part-time to help with content writing. I was working out of a co-working space and finally had weekends again. I paid off one of my student loans early just to feel something. Then came what I called the January dip. Every January, half my clients would either pause services or ghost entirely. I hadn't built in any annual contracts, and I didn't account for seasonal businesses. I panicked, dropped my prices, took on some nightmare clients, and overcorrected. That's when I realized I had built a fragile business. It was profitable but volatile. I was trading time for money, still very much in the hamster wheel, just with better furniture. So I pivoted. I built a productized service business. I took all the components of what I was offering, local SEO, listings, review management, basic ad setup, and turned it into 3 fixed packages. No custom work, no hourly rates, no vague consulting. Just a menu. I built a simple landing page and started running Google Ads targeting terms like SEO for plumbers and marketing for roofers. I used all my clients' past results as case studies. With permission, of course. I got testimonials. I had screenshots of Google Maps rankings, at dashboards, review counts. It worked. Conversion rates doubled. Sales calls dropped from 45 minutes to 20. Most importantly, I was able to hire 2 virtual assistants to handle onboarding and monthly reporting. By year 3, I was grossing $25K/month. I kept expenses low, remote team, no office, no VC nonsense. I still had imposter syndrome and stress dreams about going broke, but I also had a real business. I paid myself $10K/month, maxed out my Roth IRA, and even bought a used car in cash. Then, like every entrepreneur I know, I got cocky. I decided to build software. I thought, why not turn our process into a SaaS tool? Automate review requests, track GMB rankings, generate reports. I spent $30K hiring a dev agency and 6 months obsessing over features. We launched to crickets. Turns out, my clients didn't want another tool. They wanted less to think about, not more. The software had decent functionality, but the value was in us doing it for them, not in giving them a dashboard. I shelved the tool and chalked it up as tuition. Expensive, but valuable. After that, I doubled down on service. I refined my onboarding to a science. I created SOPs for everything from proposal creation to client offboarding. I built a tiny internal wiki, trained my team of 3 contractors, and focused on customer retention over acquisition. It paid off. Churn dropped below 5%. Referrals became my #1 source of new business. My CAC dropped to practically 0. Now, 5 years in, I run a lean agency with 40+ active clients and a team of 5. We average $38K/month in revenue, and I work about 25 hours a week. I travel more, stress less, and finally feel like I own the business instead of the other way around. There was no viral growth moment, no funding round, no magic app or influencer shout-out. Just 5 years of showing up, learning from mistakes, and doing boring things consistently well. Entrepreneurship, at least for me, wasn't a single bold leap. It was 1,000 small steps. Most of them sideways, some backward, but all of them necessary. And if you're sitting there unemployed, underpaid, or just burned out, wondering if it's too late or if you missed your chance, I promise you haven't. Your first client might just be one Craigslist post away. I never thought I'd become an entrepreneur. I didn't dream of startups, I didn't read TechCrunch, and I didn't worship Steve Jobs. I was just a guy who worked in IT at a medium-sized insurance company in Cleveland. I liked my cubicle, my regular hours, and the automatic deposit every other Friday. I thought stability was the goal until I learned what stagnation feels like. It started with a fire. Not metaphorically, a literal electrical fire in the server room. I was the guy on call. I got the alert at 2:14 a.m. I was bleary-eyed, confused, and honestly a little hungover from a Wednesday night trivia thing with friends. By the time I got to the office, the fire department had everything under control. But the equipment? Cooked. Our backups were off-site, but it still took 3 days to get everything functioning again. The aftermath was chaos. During that downtime, something weird happened. My boss asked me to come up with a plan for how we could prevent this in the future. That may not sound like much, but for 5 years I'd been doing what I was told, never asked to think strategically. Suddenly, I had a seat at the table. I put together a modest proposal for a cloud-based solution with redundancy in different zones. My boss liked it. Then his boss liked it. Then legal liked it. I ended up leading a full migration over the next 6 months. When it was done, people treated me differently, like I had vision. I didn't feel smarter. I just saw a better option. The confidence boost was subtle but steady. I started tinkering more, learning Python on the weekends, taking night classes in cloud architecture. It wasn't ambition, it was curiosity. I enjoyed solving problems that weren't mine to solve. That's when the idea hit. It came from my friend Alyssa, who managed a small local gym. Her members constantly complained about the clunky check-in software. It was expensive, bloated, and barely worked on mobile. She said, "I'd kill for something simple that just lets people check in and book classes." So I built it. Over a few weekends, I hacked together a bare-bones web app using Flask and Firebase. Alyssa tried it with a few members. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. I didn't charge her, just wanted to see if people would use it. They did. Word spread to another gym owner in her network. Then another. I started charging $20/month, which felt wildly optimistic. When I hit 10 customers, I raised it to $50. No one blinked. I was shocked. The idea of making $500 a month on something I built in my apartment was thrilling and terrifying. That's when I realized I couldn't keep doing both jobs. I didn't have investors. I didn't have a co-founder. I had a half-baked product and a small but vocal user base. Still, I made the jump. I gave notice, packed up my desk, and left my 401k, my health insurance, and my guaranteed paycheck behind. The first 3 months were awful. I thought I'd have all this time and focus, but I was scattered and exhausted. My calendar was empty, and I hated it. Without meetings or office chatter, my brain felt like a slowly deflating balloon. I missed routine. I missed people. And I missed the illusion of progress that comes from just being busy. My product, which I now call Gym Tracker, had 27 paying customers. That felt like a win, until I realized I was making $350/month and spending about $900 of it on servers, Stripe fees, email services, and domain renewals. My salary was less than my rent. So I hustled. I visited every local gym within a 50-mile radius, pitching in person. I got used to rejection. Some people weren't ready for tech. Others had contracts with legacy providers they couldn't break. But some said yes. And the yes started to compound. After 6 months, I had 73 customers. I added referral bonuses and hired a freelance UX designer to clean up the app. I released a mobile version that actually worked. Then I hit 100 gyms. Then 150. I crossed $10,000/month in recurring revenue on a humid Tuesday in July, exactly 1 year after I left my job. That milestone felt strange. I thought I'd feel like I made it. But I didn't. I felt like I'd stepped onto a treadmill that was only getting faster. Customers wanted new features. They wanted integrations. They wanted to be heard. I hired a part-time customer support rep, then a full-time engineer. I incorporated as an LLC. I raised my prices to $79 month for new customers. Only 2 gyms left, and 5 more signed up within a week. I learned a critical lesson. Undercharging was more dangerous than overcharging. By year 2, I was doing $300K ARR with 500 gyms on the platform. I still worked from my apartment, but I felt like a different person. I was a builder, a decision maker, a boss. But the loneliness crept in. Being a solo founder meant every fire was mine to put out. When Stripe changed their API and broke half my billing, it was on me. When my server crashed on New Year's Eve, I was the one patching code while watching fireworks out the window. I missed collaboration. I missed being part of something bigger. So I changed that too. I started a Slack group for indie founders in the fitness SaaS space. We shared code, vented about clients, celebrated wins. That community kept me sane. By year 3, Gym Tracker was acquired. It wasn't a unicorn story. A mid-sized fitness equipment company wanted to enter the software space. They offered a fair deal, 7 figures, mostly cash, some stock. I negotiated an advisory role with a 2-year earnout. I didn't feel like I was selling out. I felt like I was graduating. Now, a year after the acquisition, I consult for a few startups, mentor 2 founders, and sometimes just take a Tuesday off to go hiking. My bank account is healthier than it's ever been, but more importantly, so is my sense of self. I didn't set out to be an entrepreneur. I became one because I followed the sparks, one small fire at a time. I never intended to become an entrepreneur. I didn't read startup books or follow Gary Vee or obsess over Shark Tank. I wasn't hustling lemonade stands at age 7 or flipping sneakers in high school. Honestly, I just wanted out of my job. I was 32, a mid-level operations manager at a logistics company, and my days were endless spreadsheets and passive-aggressive emails. The money wasn't bad, but I'd stare at the same beige wall every day and feel like I was already retired, just not the relaxing kind. I started fantasizing about quitting more than I actually worked. I didn't know what I wanted, only that it wasn't this. My first brush with the business idea came at a family gathering. My cousin Jake was complaining about how expensive it was to rent baby gear while traveling, car seats, strollers, cribs, you name it. He and his wife had just paid nearly $200 for a weekend of equipment rental during a trip to Denver. I half joked, you could just buy it used and sell it afterward. He laughed, then got quiet. What if someone else did that for you? That sentence stuck with me. I went home and Googled for hours. Baby gear rentals existed, sure, but most of the companies were bloated or hyperlocal. The big players had clunky websites, expensive delivery fees, and mixed reviews. But what if I could build a more decentralized model? Something like an Airbnb for baby gear, where parents could rent from other parents. That night, I bought the domain journus.com for $11.99 and started sketching out a basic site on Notion. I didn't tell anyone for weeks. It felt too stupid to say out loud. I didn't have tech experience. I wasn't a parent. I wasn't even sure I liked kids. But I couldn't shake the idea. I spent nights and weekends working on a prototype. I taught myself basic front-end development with YouTube tutorials and ChatGPT. Eventually, I put together a bare-bones site where users could list gear, pick dates, and pay via Stripe. It looked awful, like Craigslist mated with a 2007 blog. But I launched it anyway. I made a Facebook page, joined every parenting group I could find, and started manually messaging people. My pitch was simple: list your baby gear when you're not using it, and earn cash. Or rent it when you're traveling and avoid overpriced companies. I offered free listings and personally verified the first 30 users. My first actual rental happened 2 months in. A mom from Sacramento rented a jogging stroller for a trip to LA for $40. I drove 45 minutes to pick it up from the lender's garage and another hour to deliver it. After Stripe's cut, I made $31. I bought myself a burrito and called it profit. Slowly, more users joined. I built out a review system, added insurance, and started automating delivery using local couriers. I got burned a lot. One renter ghosted me after scratching a $300 car seat. Another listed a moldy pack and play that nearly got me banned from a mom group. I refunded people. I apologized. I made notes of everything. About 9 months in, I had around 500 active users in California. Revenue was around $2,000/month. Not enough to quit my job, but enough to keep me up at night thinking, what if this actually works? I decided to take a risk. I gave myself a 6-month runway, pulled $20K from savings, and quit. My boss told me I was crazy. My parents told me to keep my resume updated. I told myself I'd never forgive myself if I didn't at least try. I went full throttle. I emailed bloggers. I hired a part-time developer off Upwork. I pitched to 2 angel investors and got rejected both times. But one of them gave me detailed feedback. Your idea is good. Your platform is too fragile to scale. He was right. I duct-taped everything. The site crashed with more than 20 concurrent users. The backend was a mess. I needed help. That's when I found Priya. She was a software engineer who had just left a startup after a messy layoff. We met in a founder Slack group. I offered her 10% equity to rebuild the platform in exchange for 6 months of work. She said yes after a Zoom call and a shared love of doing things the hard way. Together, we relaunched Journeys 2.0 with a cleaner UI, real-time inventory management, and a much stronger backend. The difference was immediate. Bookings doubled in 3 weeks. Word of mouth picked up. We started running small paid ads and got decent conversion. A parenting influencer shared us on Instagram and brought in 800 new signups overnight. But then COVID hit. Overnight, travel stopped. Parents weren't going anywhere, let alone renting gear from strangers. Revenue cratered to nearly zero in April. I panicked. I offered refunds. I tried pivoting to local deliveries. Nothing stuck. Priya suggested we pause and reassess. That pause saved us. We realized parents were now home, dealing with kids 24/7 and bored out of their minds. So we quietly launched a new category, toy rentals. Educational kits, play mats, activity tables. Items that could be rented for a month at a time. It took off fast. We reached $5K/month in toy rentals alone by July. By December, it was $12K/month. We weren't just a travel service anymore. We were a flexible parenting support platform. By mid-2021, we expanded to 7 metro areas. I hired a small team, customer service, 2 ops managers, and a content lead. We raised a $350K pre-seed round from a few angels who had been early users. I paid Priya a proper salary and doubled her equity. I finally took my first paycheck, $2000/month, after 18 months of zero income. Today, Journist operates in 22 cities. We've served over 18,000 families and facilitated more than 60,000 rentals. We added features like subscription boxes, eco-friendly cleaning certification, and even a grandparent mode for one-time visitors. Our monthly revenue just crossed $90K. We're not unicorn material, but we're sustainable, lean, and still growing. The weirdest part is that I still don't see myself as a real entrepreneur. I still feel like the guy who just didn't want to work in a beige office anymore. But maybe that's all an entrepreneur really is, someone who sees a crack in the system and decides to shove something through it until it holds. To anyone reading this who's stuck in a job they don't love, wondering if they have what it takes, you won't know until you try. And trying looks way less like a TED Talk and way more like delivering a stroller in the rain at 7 a.m. with a flat tire and a borrowed GPS. But it's worth it. I never thought I'd end up selling haunted dolls for a living. No, seriously. That wasn't the dream. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a filmmaker. In college, I pivoted to marketing. After college, I was unemployed for 8 months, living in my sister's basement and applying to every single job with the words entry-level and marketing in the title. Nothing. The pandemic hit, and suddenly, everyone I knew was pivoting. I started selling stuff on eBay just to cover gas money, old Funko Pops, vintage shirts, whatever I could find cheap at thrift stores. That's where this all began. The haunted doll thing? That was a joke. I bought this beat-up porcelain doll for $2 at Goodwill. It had cracked paint, one eye permanently closed, and hair like a drowned raccoon. I snapped a few pictures, wrote up a fake ghost story about it whispering at night and causing headaches and wilting plants, and listed it on eBay for $25 under Haunted Doll, do not buy if sensitive to paranormal. It sold in 42 minutes. I figured the buyer was trolling me. But then they messaged me. They were dead serious. Said they felt an energy shift the moment they unboxed it. They even left a glowing 5-star review about how it cleansed their space and gave them lucid dreams. At first, I laughed. But then I thought, what if this was a thing? That was the start of Spirit Vessel Curios. I didn't even bother incorporating right away. I just started buying every creepy, decrepit doll I could find. I'd clean them up, dress them in antique lace, Maybe chip a little more paint off to make them look spookier. Then I'd write up elaborate bios. Margaret, age 6, died in a coal fire in 1892. Seeks a new home with a warm hearth and patience for midnight humming. I sold 6 in a week. In my first month, I made $487. Not much, but it was the first time in a year I felt excited. I doubled down. Made a basic website, started an Instagram with black and white photos of the dolls next to flickering candles. Added a haunted object certification download PDF with each order. My sister thought I was losing it. "You know this isn't real, right?" she'd say. I'd just smile. By month 3, I was averaging $200 a week. The trick was in the story. I wasn't just selling dolls, I was selling lore. I got deep into Reddit's paranormal communities, Tumblr occult tags, and started sourcing stories from real ghost forums. I even hired a woman on Fiverr to do psychic channeling sessions and give me 3-sentence blurbs about the doll's past life. And then came Aloan. She was the doll that changed everything. I found her at a small antique shop upstate. Black hair, glass eyes, a red velvet dress. Already creepy as hell. I put more effort into her than anything else. Spun a long story about her being from a Victorian boarding school, abandoned after a mass poisoning. She sold for $173 in under 10 minutes. That buyer emailed me 2 days later. They said Aloan moved from the shelf to the window ledge overnight. They wanted a refund, but also they were scared to send her back. I didn't refund them. Instead, I offered to cleanse Aloan remotely, free of charge. They agreed. I emailed them a chant I found on a Wiccan blog, told them to light white candles and play Gregorian chants. They did. Next email, Aloan is peaceful now. Thank you. Word spread. In the 6th month, BuzzFeed listed my site in an article titled 10 Creepy Haunted Objects You Can Actually Buy Online. Traffic exploded. I sold out my entire inventory in 36 hours and made $7,800 in that weekend alone. Orders kept coming. People weren't just buying dolls, they were asking for custom ones. I started getting messages like, "Can you find me a haunted object connected to water spirits?" Or, "Do you have any items that help with grief energy?" I started saying yes. I hired my college friend Olivia to help write lore and respond to emails. I paid my cousin Marcus $50 a week to thrift full-time. We built a brand. I finally formed the LLC. We added pins, stickers, spell jars, and a subscription box, Curio Crate. That blew up on TikTok. We had influencers doing unboxings, pretending their dolls were cursing their exes or knocking over books. One girl claimed her haunted locket made her caddis every night at 3 a.m. That one got 1.2 million views. A year in, we hit 6 figures in revenue. I moved out of my sister's basement, rented a tiny storefront, and turned it into a combination warehouse and showroom. People came in thinking it was a gag, then bought 2 dolls and a cleansing candle on the way out. I should clarify something. I don't believe the dolls are actually haunted. I never did. It's performance art meets retail. It's storytelling. The power of suggestion is real, and people love a narrative. Are some buyers genuinely spiritual or psychic? Sure. But most just want a spooky centerpiece and a cool tale to tell. But something changed last winter. We had this doll named Elcira, dressed in 1800s mourning clothes, hands clasped in prayer. We wrote that she came from a New Orleans estate and was once owned by a widow who performed seances. That part was fake. She was from a flea market in Jersey. But after she sold, we got 3 emails from the buyer in 2 days. First email, "She's beautiful. Arrived safe. Thank you." Second email, "Lights flickered when I unwrapped her. Not joking." Third email, "Do you know anything real about this doll? I think there's something off. I've been waking up at 3:12 a.m. every night." We ignored it, assuming they were playing along. Then the buyer's sister emailed us a week later. Said the buyer was hospitalized for anxiety attacks and that the doll had been locked in their garage. They wanted a refund. Again, I didn't refund it, but I offered a ritual guide and some lavender oil. She took it. That night, Olivia came into work and said, "We need to stop selling that one." I asked her why. She said she dreamt about the doll multiple nights in a row, that it kept saying her name. Now, I know how this sounds. I don't scare easily. But after that, we took Elcira off the site. Didn't list her again. She's still in the back room, wrapped in silk, in a locked box. Business is good now. We hit $300K last year. We're talking to a documentary team. We've got a wait list for custom dolls. People write to us saying our items helped them grieve or gave them hope. Some even claim they've spoken to spirits through our objects. I still don't believe in ghosts, but I believe in stories. I believe in people needing meaning. And maybe, just maybe, I believe in Elcira. I never wanted to be an entrepreneur. I liked my safe little desk job. I worked in procurement for a mid-sized manufacturing firm in Ohio. Steady salary, health benefits, and coffee that tasted like burned cardboard, but came from a machine I didn't have to maintain. Then one February morning, I walked in to find my manager, Sam, staring at the floor with his hands in his pockets. One sentence changed my life. They're shutting down the office. Just like that, 11 years of routines and spreadsheets were done. The parent company had moved operations to Mexico. I got a severance, a LinkedIn endorsement from Sam, and a packet titled Navigating Career Transition. I went through the usual loop, resumes, Indeed, phone interviews that went nowhere. 2 months in, I was still unemployed and spiraling. I took long walks just to fill the time, sometimes ended up at the park watching squirrels chase each other like they had more direction than I did. That's when I noticed something odd. The guy selling hot dogs at the park had a line. Every single day. He was a Vietnamese immigrant named Min, and he did a weird thing. He sold fusion dogs, balmy hot dogs, kimchi kraut dogs, and even one with wasabi mayo. I asked him how business was, and he told me, smiling, better than good. He pointed to his cooler and said, "This is version 5 of my cart. Every year I upgrade." That night, I stayed up late thinking about that cooler. Why did Min keep upgrading? Why didn't he just take his profits and relax? Turns out that curiosity was the spark I needed. I didn't want to be a hot dog guy, but I wanted that. The ownership, the creativity. So I listed everything I was decent at. I wasn't a chef or a tech guy, but I was good with numbers, inventory, negotiation. Then I remembered how many hours I'd spent hunting for good coffee during my old job. I had driven across town more than once just to get a cup that didn't taste like burnt rubber. What if there was a mobile coffee truck? Not just donuts and filter coffee, but high-end, specialty espresso on wheels? The first person I told was my brother. He said, like a Starbucks food truck, and laughed, but I caught the idea in that joke. The next 3 months were hell. I pulled $$20,000 from my severance and some savings. Bought a gutted FedEx truck from Craigslist for $$8,000. Spent $$7,000 more on plumbing, a generator, secondhand espresso machines, and permits I didn't even know existed until the city hit me with inspection notices. Every time I thought I was done, someone told me, "You forgot X." At one point, I nearly gave up because I couldn't figure out groundwater disposal codes. But by late summer, I was parked outside a local co-working space with a sign that said The Grind Wagon. The first cup I sold was to a guy in a blazer who took a sip, then said, "Damn, this is legit." I will never forget that. Business was slow at first. My second day, I made $42. Third day, it rained and I made $11. But I kept moving around, testing spots. I learned to track pedestrian patterns like a hawk. I started asking people what drinks they wished we had. One person wanted oat milk. Another asked about pour-over. I adjusted. After 6 weeks, I had a basic rhythm and started making just enough to pay my bills and eat something besides peanut butter. That's when a woman named Tasha approached the truck. She was in marketing for a nearby startup incubator and asked if I catered events. I lied and said yes. That weekend, I Googled how to cater coffee and showed up at their brunch with every thermos and French press I owned. It was chaos, but people loved it. I got 3 new bookings from that one event. That changed everything. I hired my cousin Kyle to help with weekday mornings. He had no barista experience, but a natural hustle. We started offering cold brew in 64-ounce growlers, which people could order by text and pick up curbside. Within 4 months, we had repeat customers texting us on Sunday to reserve their coffee for the week. I paid off the truck by month 9. Year 2, I reinvested everything. Bought a second truck, newer, with a better generator and air conditioning. I hired 2 part-time baristas and rotated between downtown, a hospital parking lot, and weekend farmers markets. We started experimenting with seasonal flavors, which we labeled like craft beers, Maple Manifesto, Chai Hard, Peppermint Panic. People loved it. Of course, there were disasters. One Monday, the espresso machine on truck number 1 short-circuited mid-rush. I had to refund 32 orders and lost a whole day's revenue. Another time, Kyle reversed into a mailbox and bent the back door shut. We had to serve through the side window for 2 weeks. But even in the low moments, there was momentum. I was building something real. By year 3, we were profitable enough that I leased a tiny warehouse space and built a prep kitchen. We began selling our cold brew concentrate wholesale to 3 local cafes. I also hired Min, yes, the hot dog guy, to be our operations consultant. He helped streamline inventory and scheduling in a way I never thought possible. The man was a genius. Right before the pandemic hit, I was gearing up to launch a 3rd truck. When lockdown started, I panicked. Coffee is social. I thought we were dead. But weirdly, we pivoted fast. We converted the trucks into mobile delivery and contactless pickup points. People could order online and get a latte brought to their porch. We called it No Hands Brew. It wasn't ideal, but it kept us alive. Post-pandemic, we opened a permanent cafe inside a refurbished shipping container, our first storefront. We didn't even hang a big sign. Just a painted stencil, the Grind Wagon HQ. Now, 5 years in, we do around $850K in annual revenue across trucks, wholesale, and the HQ cafe. I employ 9 people. Kyle runs HR. Min still consults. And I finally sleep without worrying about water disposal. Sometimes I think back to that February morning in the office, the way Sam looked at the floor. I thought I was losing everything. But losing the job was the best thing that ever happened to me. It forced me to create something of my own, one mistake at a time. Not everyone should be an entrepreneur. It's brutal, lonely, and exhausting. But if you're wired for it, if the idea of building something from zero makes your heart race, then there's no better job in the world. Just don't forget the oat milk. Hey, friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. I didn't set out to become an entrepreneur. In fact, if you had asked 22-year-old me what I wanted to do with my life, I probably would have said, get a stable job, pay off my student loans, and not get yelled at by a boss every day. But life, as always, had other plans. The story starts in a rust-colored office park in Columbus, Ohio. I was 2 years out of college and working as a marketing coordinator at a regional insurance company. It paid okay, and I had health insurance. But every day felt like a slow leak in a tire. Nothing dramatic, just the persistent hiss of ambition escaping. The turning point came during a lunch break in late October. I was scrolling through my phone and saw a post about a guy who had turned an Excel spreadsheet into a 6-figure SaaS business. I remember thinking, if someone can sell access to a spreadsheet, what the hell am I doing making pitch decks for another company's products? That night, I stayed late in the office, not to finish work, but to start sketching out an idea. Over the next few months, my obsession grew. I wasn't even sure what I was building yet, but I knew I wanted to get into the creator tool space. I had noticed that more and more small creators, podcasters, niche bloggers, indie authors, were struggling with monetization. Platforms were taking huge cuts, and many creators were cobbling together 5 or 6 tools to run what was essentially a one-person business. The concept I eventually landed on was called Stitch, a lightweight, plug-and-play dashboard for creators that consolidated revenue streams, email marketing, basic analytics, and fan subscriptions. It wasn't exactly revolutionary, but the twist was that it would integrate cleanly with platforms people were already using, instead of trying to replace them. The MVP was held together by duct tape and prayer. I hired a freelance developer off Upwork for $25/hour, wrote every help doc myself, and ran onboarding calls from my car during lunch breaks. I used Airtable as a back-end database and had a hacked-together Stripe integration for payments. When I launched on Product Hunt in April, I had maybe 50 beta users, most of whom I'd personally emailed. It tanked. We got a couple hundred upvotes, a bunch of lurkers, and only 9 signups, 3 of which converted to paid after the free trial. I was crushed. I went home that night and told my girlfriend I was probably done. I felt like a clown. Who was I to think I could build a product that mattered? But something happened that weekend that changed everything. One of the early users, a fitness influencer with about 80K followers, emailed me with a detailed breakdown of how Stitch had helped him save hours every week. He even made a Loom video walking through what he liked and where it could improve. I watched that video 3 times. It reminded me that I didn't need thousands of users yet. I just needed to solve one person's problem really well. So I doubled down. I asked every user who canceled for a 10-minute call, I spent evenings manually migrating data for people who wanted to try Stitch, but were too busy to set it up themselves. I posted on Reddit, Twitter, and in obscure Facebook groups. I bartered software credits for shoutouts and used my weekends to go to local creator meetups just to pitch the product in person. By the end of that summer, we had 200 paying users and were making $4,800 MRR. It wasn't a rocket ship, but it was mine. I quit my job in September and went full-time. Year 2 was the real trial by fire. My developer quit. He got a full-time offer he couldn't refuse. The platform broke twice in a week, and a small influencer called us out on Twitter for stealing data, which we weren't, but the optics were bad. I had a meltdown that week. I remember sitting in my apartment, staring at a bottle of whiskey at 2 a.m., wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. But again, the users saved me. I emailed every single one of our active subscribers explaining what happened, how we were fixing it, and what I was doing to ensure it never happened again. I expected at least 30% churn. We lost 8%. That's when I realized something crucial. People don't expect startups to be perfect, but they expect you to care. By year 3, Stitch was making just over $22K MRR. I hired a CTO, someone way more experienced than me, and together we rebuilt the product from the ground up. We streamlined onboarding, added more integrations, and finally invested in customer support. We grew faster after that. By the end of year 4, we were doing $70K MRR and had 5 full-time team members. I was finally paying myself more than I made in my old corporate job. We were profitable, and most importantly, we were helping thousands of creators make a living on their own terms. But here's the part people don't talk about. I started to burn out. I had spent 4 years running full speed, nights, weekends, holidays. Even as we grew, I felt more pressure, not less. Every time we launched a new feature or raised prices, I felt like I was gambling with people's livelihoods. I wasn't sleeping well. I was constantly anxious. I snapped at friends and lost touch with family. My relationship fell apart. So I made the hardest decision yet. I stepped back. I promoted our CTO to CEO, moved into an advisory role, and took a 6-month sabbatical. I traveled for the first time in years. I started going to therapy. I reconnected with people I hadn't seen since college. And I realized that the company didn't need me to be at the helm for it to thrive. That was a strange but comforting feeling. Today, Stitch is still going strong. We recently passed $100K MRR and were acquired by a larger software platform that wants to expand into the creator economy. I kept a small equity stake, enough to never have to work again if I don't want to. But I do want to. Not because I want to build the next unicorn, but because I love creating something from nothing. That feeling of watching a stranger use your product and smile is better than any paycheck I've ever gotten. So now, I'm working on a new idea. Smaller, simpler. I'm building a tool to help indie writers publish serialized fiction directly to their fans. No middlemen, no gatekeepers, just stories and readers. If I've learned anything over the past 5 years, it's this. You don't need to change the world to build something meaningful. You just need to care enough to start and stubborn enough to keep going. I started a company with my best friend. It grew fast, made us both millionaires in under 4 years, and then it collapsed so hard I almost lost everything, including the friendship. Here's how it all went down. To understand why this story matters, you need to know who I was before. I was the typical mid-20s, maybe I'll do a startup someday kind of guy. College grad, 2 failed side hustles, working a pretty cushy but boring job in marketing analytics at a mid-sized SaaS company in Chicago. My best friend James was the more technical one, self-taught dev, super into crypto, hated authority. We'd always joked about starting something together. In mid-2019, James started playing around with web scraping tools and automation scripts, mostly for fun. One day, he showed me a script he built that could automatically scrape leads from Instagram, emails, engagement data, niche tags, even DM them. It was pretty rough, but he had hooked it into Zapier and MailChimp. As a marketer, I immediately saw the gold mine. I pitched the idea to him. What if we turned this into a SaaS tool? Something targeted at influencers, e-com stores, digital agencies, people who lived on Instagram and were always chasing leads. We could clean it up, make a sleek front end, charge $30, $50/month. He was into it. We called it Glimmer Reach. Don't judge the name. We thought it sounded cool. We spent 6 weeks building the MVP. I designed a basic website, wrote landing page copy, and set up Stripe. He focused on the back end. We launched on Product Hunt with zero expectations. We got 400 signups in 2 days. The product kind of sucked, it broke a lot, but people still paid. About 70 converted into paying customers at $29/month. I remember calling James and just yelling into the phone, "Dude, we're doing this." The next year was a rocket ride. We reinvested every dollar back into the product. We didn't pay ourselves a salary. Every cent went to better infrastructure, customer support, and bringing on a part-time UI guy. We hit $25K MRR in 10 months. Then COVID hit. You'd think that would hurt us. But our niche, scrappy digital marketers trying to hustle from home, exploded. Everyone wanted tools to grow their online presence. We grew to $80K MRR by the end of 2020. We raised a $750K angel round from a few Twitter angels and tiny funds. We incorporated. We hired 3 devs and 2 customer success reps. I finally quit my job. By mid-2021, we were doing $130K MRR. James and I each took a modest $75K salary, but our shares were worth millions on paper. Our users loved the product. Churn was manageable. We were talking to a few VCs for a seed round. Life felt surreal. Then the first cracks started to show. Instagram started cracking down on automation. Accounts using our tools started getting rate limited or banned. Our scraper began returning errors. We had to rewrite large portions of our backend. James was burning out. He hated dealing with compliance and platform updates. They keep moving the goalposts, he told me. We brainstormed pivot ideas, TikTok tools, multi-platform engagement trackers, even a pivot to become a full CRM for creators. But none of it excited us like the original idea had. Meanwhile, customer support tickets piled up. Our churn rate crept up to 12%, then 15%. We stopped growing. By late 2021, our $750K was nearly gone. We were back to $90K MRR and sliding. We tried raising a seed round, but the market was cooling. Investors were skeptical of our dependency on Instagram. One VC said, "You guys are a compliance risk dressed like a SaaS company." Ouch. Then James dropped a bombshell. He told me he wanted to step back, go part-time, maybe even exit. He was burned out and disillusioned. "I built a cool hack that turned into a business, but I don't want to be a CEO," he said. I was furious. I felt like he was abandoning me mid-battle. But I also got it. He'd been carrying the tech side alone for almost 3 years. We tried bringing in a CTO. We hired a guy from another YC startup. He was competent but didn't get the culture. The dev team didn't trust him. James kept having to jump back in anyway. Tensions rose. Slack messages turned passive-aggressive. We had our first full-on argument during a board call. By early 2022, our MRR was down to $65K. We had 7 employees, no runway, and a fading brand. We offered a buyout to James. He'd keep 15% equity. We'd pay him out $200K over 18 months if we raised more cash or sold. He accepted. I cried that night. I tried running Glimmerreach solo for 6 more months. Pivoted to LinkedIn tools. Rebranded. Burned through the last of our cash, trying to make it work. But it wasn't the same without James. The product lost its soul. Our remaining users felt it. In August 2022, I made the call, shut it down. We laid off the team. I personally refunded our last month of subscription fees to our remaining users. We archived the servers. James and I barely talked for 8 months. It's now 2025. I've since started a new company. Ironically, a B2B compliance tool. Go figure. It's boring but stable. We're profitable at $40K MRR with a team of 4. James and I grabbed drinks last month for the first time in years. He's freelancing again, happier than I've seen him in a while. Looking back, Glimmerreach was a beautiful mess. It made me, broke me, taught me everything. I learned that product market fit can carry you far, but founder alignment is everything. That fast money is fragile. That even with growth, you need to plan for decay. And that friendship and business can mix, but only if you build systems to protect both. Would I do it all again? Yeah, in a heartbeat. A little over 6 years ago, I was folding shirts in the back room of a mid-tier clothing store, arguing with my manager about whether or not I was allowed to bring a smoothie to the stockroom. I had a business degree in $57,000 in student debt. I also had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I hated every shift. I hated the fluorescent lighting, the awkward small talk, the 15-minute breaks that always felt like 5. Most of all, I hated that I'd spent 4 years learning about innovation and market disruption, and yet here I was, memorizing SKU numbers and dodging coworkers who still called me new guy after 11 months. The thing that finally broke me wasn't even dramatic. I asked for a Saturday off for a friend's wedding. My manager said no because the schedule's already tight. I walked out to my car on lunch break and just didn't go back. No notice. No plan. I ghosted my job like a bad Tinder date. That night, I opened a Google Doc and started listing every single thing I was even mildly good at. Writing. Spreadsheets. Graphic design, mediocre. Photography, worse. But one thing kept coming back to me. I knew how to find stuff online. Weird, niche stuff. In college, people always asked me to help them find rare clothing items, weird Japanese stationery, out-of-print books. I was fast. Like really fast. That gave me the seed of an idea. What if I became a kind of digital personal shopper? I threw up a landing page on Card, slapped a PayPal button on it, and wrote this one-liner at the top. Can't find it? I will. I named it Finderly. It sounded techish. I charged $5 for anything under $100 and $15 for harder stuff. For the first 2 weeks, nothing. Then someone DM'd me on Twitter asking if I could find a discontinued Lego set. I found it in 14 minutes and sent him a link. He paid me, tipped me $3, and I felt like Elon Musk. It took 6 months before I was making enough to cover rent, but I was living at my aunt's place, paying $300 a month for a room the size of a closet, so the bar was low. I reinvested most of it into building a slightly better website. Eventually, I added a form where people could enter details about the item they were looking for. I also quietly raised my prices. The real breakthrough came when a sneaker reseller in Chicago reached out. He asked if I could help him source hard-to-find sneakers from overseas. I said yes, even though I had no idea how. That forced me to figure out international marketplaces, use VPNs to get around region blocks, and build relationships with people on Discord and eBay who lived in places I couldn't pronounce. I took a 10% cut on every sale I helped him make. That guy told his friends. I started getting DMs from boutique owners, small-time Amazon sellers, Etsy resellers, even prop managers for indie films. Apparently, there was a small but real market for digital sourcing agents. After a year and a half, I was making $6K a month. I moved out of my aunt's place and rented a tiny studio. I hired my first contractor, some guy in the Philippines I found on Upwork, just to help handle the time zone difference when people wanted things sourced from Asia. By year 3, there were 4 of us, and we built internal tools to crawl dozens of niche e-commerce sites, forums, and marketplaces. But it wasn't all exponential growth. I nearly killed the business in year 4. I got cocky and decided to pivot Finderly into a B2B SaaS tool. I wanted recurring revenue and scalability, the holy grail of startup dreams. I spent $40,000 hiring a dev agency to build a product that allowed businesses to automate their sourcing requests with AI and integrations. What I didn't realize is that most of our clients valued the human part of what we did. They wanted the nuance, the gut checks, the emails back and forth. The SaaS version launched with 500 free trials and converted 17 paid users. It tanked our cash flow. I laid off 2 contractors and dipped into my emergency fund. I was embarrassed. I didn't even tell my parents. I almost shut it all down. But then I got an email from one of our original clients. Hey, just wanted to say, I really miss working with you guys the old way. You always understood the weird details we needed. Hope you're still around. That message saved the business. I rolled everything back, reopened the old-style service, and doubled down on concierge-style sourcing. This time, we leaned into it. We added Slack integrations for top-tier clients, set up sourcing dashboards, even offered fulfillment help through third-party logistics partners. By year 5, we passed $500K in revenue. Today, I have a team of 11 across 6 countries. Our average order size is $240, And our clients include everyone from indie game developers sourcing rare collector's items to a major studio that uses us for prop replication. I've been interviewed by a podcast I used to listen to while folding shirts. Finderly is still bootstrapped. I own 100% of it. I never took a dime of VC. I answer every email from a new client personally, and I still get a rush when I help someone find something they thought was gone forever. Last week, we tracked down a first edition copy of a 1973 cookbook from a garage sale listing in rural Wales. That was a fun one. It's not glamorous. No hockey stick graph. No TechCrunch headline. But I went from folding shirts to running a weird little business that makes weird people happy, and I wouldn't trade that for anything. If you're reading this while stuck in a job you hate, just know the first thing doesn't have to be the perfect thing. It just has to be a thing. Start there. I started a company after getting laid off during the pandemic. I had no capital, no plan, and, honestly, no idea what I was doing. But I had time, rage, and a garage full of stuff I hadn't touched in years. Before everything went sideways, I worked in middle management at a logistics firm. Nothing exciting, but it paid well and kept the lights on. When COVID hit, they called it a strategic reduction in workforce. I was out the door with 2 weeks severance and a pat on the back for 7 years of service. With a mortgage and a wife 6 months pregnant, I felt the walls closing in real fast. I spent the first month in a daze. Watched a lot of YouTube. Drank too much coffee. Punched the garage wall one night after checking my dwindling bank account. And then, one random Tuesday, I noticed an old 3D printer sitting on a shelf. I had bought it on a whim 2 years earlier and never used it for anything beyond some cheap phone holders. But that night, I set it up again. The first few prints were terrible. Warped, messy, useless. But I kept at it, spending hours tweaking the settings, cleaning nozzles, leveling beds. I dove into forums, watched tutorials, ordered better filament. After a week, I made a decent key holder. Then a mini lamp. Then a complex gear system. And then I remembered something odd. A coworker once joked that if anyone could make a custom adapter for his drone batteries, they'd make a killing. I had time. I had the printer. So I tried. It took 9 prototypes, lots of cursing, and a new nozzle, but eventually I made something that worked. I posted about it on a small drone hobbyist subreddit. The next morning, I had 36 DMs. I called the thing VoltSnap and started printing batches from my garage. My wife helped package orders. We used our dining table as the shipping station. That first month, we made $900. Then $2, 100. Then $5 for 100. It felt unreal, but I was burning out fast. One printer wasn't enough. I bought 2 more with what little profit we had. Then hired a college kid from the neighborhood to help fulfill orders. He brought me into Discord channels I never knew existed. That's when I found my real niche. Customizable power accessories for hobby electronics. Not just drones, e-bikes, RC cars, mobile solar setups. We rebranded to SnapForge and built a basic Shopify site. I watched videos on marketing, SEO, and customer retention while rocking my newborn daughter to sleep at 3 a.m. 6 months in, we crossed $30K in monthly revenue. But now we were hitting serious production bottlenecks. I couldn't scale with just home printers. I reached out to a friend of a friend who had worked in plastics and asked if he knew anything about injection molding. He gave me a crash course and introduced me to a manufacturer in Ohio. The initial mold cost $14,000, money we didn't have. So I sold my car. My wife, God bless her, offered to sell her engagement ring too. I didn't let her. Instead, I applied for a small business loan and managed to get $20K after 3 rejections. The first batch was rough. Quality was inconsistent. One client posted a complaint on a popular maker forum, and our traffic tanked for a week. I took full responsibility, refunded him personally, and even sent him a better prototype free of charge. He later became one of our biggest evangelists. A year in, we had 2 part-time employees, a rented 1,200 square foot space, and a list of retailers asking for bulk pricing. We launched a Kickstarter for our newest product, a universal battery docking system, and raised $187,000 in 30 days. Things exploded after that. I did podcasts, wrote articles, gave talks at maker events. My face was on a billboard at CES, just a small one, but still. I was running a real company. We hit backslash $1.2 million in sales that year. I paid off the loan, hired a full-time customer service rep, got health insurance again, bought back the car I sold. But it wasn't all sunshine. Supply chain delays almost killed our momentum in 2023. Our manufacturer ran into a labor shortage, and I had to fly to Ohio myself to figure it out. Slept in a motel for 2 weeks and packed boxes with their team just to get things moving. Competitors sprang up. Some copied our designs outright. I had to lawyer up and fight one guy who literally ripped our logo and changed one letter. That legal bill still haunts me. Still, we adapted. Started doing small batch in-house production again to test new ideas before committing to molds. We created a beta program with our most loyal customers to help refine products. I hired a brilliant young engineer who had been following our subreddit for months and redesigned our core lineup to make it modular and easier to ship. 3 years after starting in my garage, SnapForge has 14 employees, a warehouse, and distribution deals in 11 countries. My daughter is old enough now to come visit the office and play with the test rigs. My wife is our head of operations. The college kid I hired? Now our lead on community engagement. It still feels weird. I wake up some mornings thinking I need to clock into a job I don't have anymore. But then I get to my desk, fire up the Slack channel, and watch the team solve problems, build cool stuff, and joke about resin curing times. I started this out of desperation. Now, I wake up excited, not just for myself, but for the weird little empire we're building out of connectors and dreams. If you're thinking about starting something, don't wait until it's perfect. Start when it's real. Start when it's messy. Start with what you've got in your garage. You never know. I've been an entrepreneur for almost 10 years now, and what I'm about to share is the story of how I went from living paycheck to paycheck, unsure of my future, to running a multi-million-dollar business. It's been a crazy journey filled with highs, lows, and a lot of lessons learned the hard way. It all started back in 2014. I was working a 9-to-5 job at a marketing firm, handling social media accounts for small businesses. I was decent at my job, but I was always restless. I knew that there had to be more to life than waking up, going to work, and coming home just to do it all again the next day. The problem was, I had no idea what more was. I had a few side hustles here and there, some small freelance projects, selling things online, trying my hand at blogging, but nothing ever really clicked. My bills were paid, but I wasn't getting ahead. I was living in a small apartment in a city that was growing more expensive by the day. Every month was a struggle to make ends meet. In 2015, I came across an online community of entrepreneurs. I'd always been fascinated by people who had started their own businesses, but I never thought it was something I could actually do. I saw people in these forums sharing their stories of starting with nothing, just like me, and building something amazing. That was the moment everything changed for me. One guy's story stood out to me. He had started an online store selling a niche product, and within a few years, it turned into a 6-figure business. He didn't have a ton of startup money, no fancy education. He was just a guy with an idea, some grit, and a lot of hustle. I decided right then and there that I was going to do it too. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to sell, but I knew I had to find something that was unique and would stand out. I spent hours researching different industries, reading market trends, and looking for any gaps I could fill. I eventually stumbled upon the world of eco-friendly products. More and more people were becoming conscious about sustainability, and there was a growing demand for environmentally friendly alternatives to everyday products. I thought, this could be it. I could create a brand that offers products that help people live more sustainably. The next step was finding a product to sell, and after weeks of research, I settled on bamboo toothbrushes. It was simple, practical, and affordable. It wasn't a completely unique idea, but I felt that with the right branding and marketing, I could make it stand out in the crowded eco-market. I started small. I created a basic website, set up an online store, and ordered a few hundred bamboo toothbrushes from a supplier I found online. My total investment was under $1,000. I used my evenings and weekends to work on the store, perfecting the copy, setting up social media accounts, and learning as much as I could about running an e-commerce business. The first few months were tough. I didn't know much about SEO, digital ads, or email marketing. Sales were slow, and I started to doubt myself. I remember staring at my website analytics, watching the numbers go up and down, and wondering if I had made a huge mistake. But I kept pushing. I reached out to influencers in the sustainability niche and sent them free products in exchange for reviews. Slowly but surely, things started to pick up. The breakthrough came when one influencer with a large following posted about my bamboo toothbrushes on Instagram. I was getting 100, 200, even 500 orders in a day, far more than I could handle at the time. It felt like I had hit the jackpot, but it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. I quickly realized how unprepared I was to scale. My supplier couldn't keep up with the demand, and I was spending every waking hour packing and shipping orders myself. I was losing money on shipping costs, struggling with inventory management, and trying to balance my full-time job with my growing side business. That's when I had to make the hardest decision I've ever had to make. I knew that if I wanted to keep growing, I had to quit my job and focus on this business full-time. It was terrifying. I had no guarantees, no safety net, but I felt like I was onto something big. So, in late 2016, I took the leap and went all in on my bamboo toothbrush business. The first few months were chaotic. I worked 12 to 14-hour days, 7 days a week. I hired my first employee, a part-time assistant to help with customer service and order fulfillment. I invested in Facebook ads, learning the ins and outs of paid marketing, and slowly began to expand my product line to include other eco-friendly items like reusable straws, biodegradable phone cases, and organic cotton bags. My brand started to gain more recognition, and my business grew rapidly. By 2018, I had hired a full team, moved into a larger warehouse, and reached a six-figure revenue. But just as I thought things were looking up, disaster struck. My supplier, who had been handling most of my products, suddenly went out of business. It was a nightmare. I was left with no products, no backup plan, and an entire customer base expecting deliveries. I scrambled to find new suppliers, but it wasn't easy. In the meantime, I had to manage angry customers, fulfill back orders, and rebuild trust in my brand. That period was one of the toughest in my career, but it taught me the importance of diversification and having backup plans. After getting through that crisis, I started building stronger relationships with multiple suppliers and even started developing my own products to ensure I wouldn't be at the mercy of one company again. Fast forward to 2023. My business is now a thriving, multi-million-dollar brand, and we have expanded to selling products in over 20 countries. I've learned more in these past few years than I ever could have imagined. The challenges never stop coming, but now, instead of feeling like I'm drowning, I have the experience and the confidence to tackle them head-on. Looking back, I never could have predicted this journey. I never would have guessed that a simple bamboo toothbrush would lead to this success. The key, I've learned, isn't in finding the perfect idea right away. It's in having the perseverance to keep going when things get tough, the willingness to learn from your mistakes, and the courage to take risks when you have nothing to lose. If I could offer one piece of advice to anyone reading this who's considering starting their own business, it would be this: don't wait for the perfect moment. Don't wait for all your ducks to be in a row, because they never will be. Just start. You'll make mistakes, but that's how you'll learn. The journey won't be easy, but it will be worth it. I'm not done yet. I've got bigger dreams now, expanding into new markets, launching more products, and finding even more ways to make a positive impact on the planet. It's crazy to think how far I've come from that 9 to 5 job I was so miserable in, but I wouldn't trade this crazy entrepreneurial ride for anything. So here's to anyone who's just starting out, struggling, or thinking about quitting. Keep going. You've got this. I was 22 years old when I first started my business, and I had no idea what I was getting myself into. My family had always been middle class, and though they were supportive of my dreams, they didn't really understand what it would take to build something from the ground up. I didn't come from a family of entrepreneurs. In fact, I didn't even know any. The idea of running a business or being my own boss felt like an impossible dream that only other people could achieve. It all started when I was working a boring office job at a tech company. It wasn't the worst job in the world, but it was soul-sucking. I would sit at my desk for hours, staring at the clock, counting down the minutes until I could leave and do something that felt meaningful. But I didn't know what that something was. I wasn't really passionate about tech, and I certainly didn't want to spend the rest of my life working in a cubicle. Then, one afternoon, I had a conversation with a coworker that changed everything. We were chatting during a lunch break about the state of the job market when they mentioned how there were so many opportunities online for small businesses to thrive. It was as though a light bulb went off in my head. I had always been interested in digital marketing and social media, but I had never considered using that interest to actually start a business. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that there were endless opportunities for someone like me to carve out a niche in the digital world. I decided to take the plunge. I saved up a small amount of money over the next few months, and with a mix of excitement and fear, I quit my job. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but deep down, I felt like I had to give it a shot. At first, I had no idea what kind of business to start. I tried a few things that didn't work, selling custom t-shirts, dropshipping gadgets, and even attempting to write a blog about lifestyle hacks. All of these were failures, and it was a tough pill to swallow. It's one thing to hear about people failing when they're trying to start something, but it's another to experience it firsthand. You question your judgment, your ability, and wonder if maybe you're just not cut out for entrepreneurship. But something inside me kept pushing me forward. I took each failure as a lesson, and after a year of trial and error, I realized that the one thing I was really good at was helping businesses grow online. I started to reach out to small local businesses, coffee shops, boutiques, and gyms, and offered to help them with their social media marketing. I didn't have much to show for my work at the time, but I worked tirelessly to create content that would drive traffic to their social pages and websites. I promised them that I would help increase their customer base and get more sales, all for a small monthly fee. Surprisingly, some of them took a chance on me. The results weren't immediate, but over time, I was able to turn around a few businesses by running targeted Facebook ads and creating engaging Instagram content. Slowly, I started to build a portfolio. I began using my personal social media to showcase the work I was doing. By the end of the second year, I had a handful of clients. The momentum was starting to build, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was in control of my destiny. However, things didn't get any easier. I was constantly juggling client demands, trying to learn new skills, and working long hours. There were times when I barely slept, and it felt like I was on the verge of burnout. But the one thing that kept me going was the feedback I was getting from my clients. They were thrilled with the results, and I started to get referrals from them. Business was growing, but I was also starting to realize that I needed help. I hired my first employee, a young graphic designer named Sarah, who was amazing at creating content. With her help, we could take on more clients and offer more services. We expanded our team over the next year, bringing on more social media managers, designers, and even a project manager to keep everything running smoothly. But the bigger our company got, the more I realized that growth wasn't always linear. There were challenges at every turn: hiring the right people, managing cash flow, dealing with clients who expected more than we could provide, and trying to balance personal life with work. At one point, I reached a crossroads where I had to make a tough decision. We had grown so much that I could no longer manage everything by myself, but I didn't want to lose the control I had over the business. I was scared of letting go. Eventually, I realized that to scale, I needed to trust my team and delegate. I began letting go of smaller tasks, like handling the social media for some clients and approving every design. Instead, I focused on the bigger picture, developing strategies, building relationships with clients, and finding ways to grow the business even further. Around the same time, I started considering new revenue streams. We launched a set of online courses for small business owners, teaching them how to use social media effectively. The courses were a hit, and they became a reliable source of passive income for the company. By diversifying our offerings, we were able to weather the inevitable ups and downs that come with running a business. Fast forward to today, and our business has grown beyond what I ever imagined. We now work with large corporations and have expanded to multiple countries. We've become known for delivering results, and we've developed a reputation for being one of the top digital marketing agencies in our industry. However, despite all of our success, I still remember those early days, how uncertain and overwhelming everything felt. I've learned that entrepreneurship isn't a straight path. There's no magical formula for success. It takes hard work, a willingness to fail, and the ability to adapt. There are days when it feels like everything is going wrong, and there are days when it feels like you're on top of the world. But through it all, the one thing that keeps me going is the belief that I am building something meaningful. And that, in the end, is what makes all the struggles worth it. I still talk to my old coworkers from that tech company, and sometimes they ask me if I have any advice for them. I always tell them the same thing: don't wait for the perfect time to start. If you have an idea, go for it. There will never be a right moment, but the act of trying is what leads to growth. No one is going to hand you success on a silver platter. You have to earn it every single day. And even when you fail, just remember that failure is part of the journey. What matters is how you get back up and keep moving forward. Entrepreneurship isn't just about making money. It's about creating something that aligns with your values and your vision. I'm living proof that it's possible to go from a boring office job to running a successful business, but it's taking years of hard work, sacrifice, and, most importantly, persistence. If you're reading this and thinking about starting your own business, know this: it will be hard and it will be messy. But if you're willing to put in the work, stay true to your vision, and keep learning, you can create something incredible. Just don't give up. I've always been the kind of person who believes in the power of persistence. My story starts like so many others, struggling, questioning if this whole entrepreneurship thing was even worth it. But here I am, sitting in my office with a team of 15, reflecting on a journey that almost broke me but also made me who I am today. It all began 6 years ago when I quit my steady job as a marketing executive to pursue my own startup. I had an idea that seemed brilliant at the time, a platform that would allow small businesses to easily build and manage their online presence. I had worked with small businesses for years and saw how difficult it was for them to maintain a professional website and an online presence. The idea of creating a one-stop shop for this was exciting. I could solve their problems and, of course, make a lot of money in the process. I had no prior experience in tech or running a business, but I figured, how hard could it be? I had the marketing knowledge, a decent network, and a vision. I thought I could teach myself how to code, hire a few freelance developers, and build a product that would change the world. Spoiler alert, I was wrong. I spent the first few months on the project working nonstop, learning about web development, building wireframes, and sketching out the user interface. But every time I tried to create something functional, I realized it wasn't good enough. I spent days debugging, getting frustrated, and then eventually hiring freelance developers to help. I thought, okay, now I have the right team, and things will finally move forward. But it wasn't that simple. The first lesson I learned was that having a vision doesn't mean you know how to execute it. Every time I thought I was moving in the right direction, something else would fall apart. The website looked great on paper, but it was buggy, slow, and nothing like I imagined. We couldn't even get past the basic login functionality without it crashing. Still, I pressed on. I used my savings to keep the project alive, borrowing money from family, getting side gigs to keep the lights on. Every failure only made me more determined. I would read books about startups, attend networking events, and watch countless YouTube videos to fill in the gaps. But at the end of the day, the company was just me and a handful of developers who weren't fully committed. I kept wondering, why isn't this working? Then came the turning point. About 10 months in, I ran out of money. The developers I'd hired had long since given up, and I had nothing to show for it. I was at rock bottom. I remember one night, sitting in my tiny apartment, staring at the screen, trying to figure out what went wrong. I had friends who told me I should just throw in the towel and get a real job, but I wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. It was around this time that I met Jason. Jason was a friend of a friend, and he had built a successful SaaS company from the ground up. He could see I was struggling, so he offered to meet for coffee. I didn't know it at the time, but that coffee would change my life. Jason didn't sugarcoat anything. He told me that my idea was solid, but my execution was a mess. He said I had the vision, but I didn't understand the business side of things. He recommended that I focus less on the product for a moment and think about the customer. What problem was I solving for them? What was my unique value proposition? And most importantly, how would I get people to pay for it? His words stung, but they also gave me clarity. I realized I had been so focused on creating the perfect product that I had neglected the customer experience. I was trying to build a Ferrari when I couldn't even get the engine to start. I took his advice to heart and began rethinking my approach. I reached out to my initial customers and asked for honest feedback. I learned that they didn't care about all the flashy features I had been obsessed with. They just wanted something that worked, something simple and easy to use. It was a brutal wake-up call, but it helped me refocus. With Jason's help, I started to strip down my idea to the essentials. I revamped the website, cut out unnecessary features, and focused on delivering a simple, user-friendly platform that would do exactly what my customers needed. It wasn't perfect, but it was functional. By the time I launched the new version of my platform, I had run out of options. I had no more money to keep funding the project. So this was it, the moment of truth. I set up a landing page, built a simple email list, and sent out the link to everyone I knew. I asked my friends and family to spread the word, and to my surprise, the first few customers trickled in. It wasn't an overnight success, but slowly, we gained traction. I spent the next year obsessively working on customer feedback, iterating on the product, and refining our marketing. I started learning about sales funnels, SEO, content marketing, and partnerships. I even got a part-time job to keep things going while I bootstrapped the company. After a few months of steady growth, I made my first hire, a developer who was just as passionate as I was about the product. We worked tirelessly to improve the platform, and as our user base grew, we started getting recognized in the industry. Our customers loved what we were doing, and word-of-mouth referrals helped us grow faster than I ever imagined. Fast forward to today, and I run a company with a small but dedicated team of 15 people. We're profitable, we have thousands of active users, and we've expanded into new markets. But it hasn't been easy, and there have been countless nights where I wondered if it was all worth it. I think back to those days when I was scraping by, when I doubted myself, and I know that persistence was the key. I never gave up. And while there's still so much work ahead, I've learned that success doesn't come from a perfect product or a flawless plan. It comes from the willingness to keep going, even when it feels impossible. So, if you're out there wondering if you should keep pushing, or if your startup is ever going to take off, take it from me. The only way to fail is to quit. There will be moments when it feels like everything is falling apart, but those moments are part of the journey. Keep learning, keep improving, and most importantly, keep going. If you're willing to persist long enough, you'll eventually make it, too. I started my business in my parents' garage. It wasn't glamorous. In fact, at first, it felt like a joke. I was fresh out of college, without a clear career plan, and honestly, I was tired of working dead-end jobs that felt like a never-ending loop of waiting for something better to come along. I didn't have rich parents to fund my startup dreams, but I did have a passion for technology and a stubborn streak. It all began in 2015. I was 24, just graduated, and still figuring out what I wanted to do with my life. One night, after getting home from yet another mind-numbing retail job, I found myself scrolling through Kickstarter and Indiegogo, looking at all the cool new tech gadgets that were being funded by people just like me. Ordinary folks with an idea and the guts to pursue it. It sparked something in me, and by the end of that night, I was convinced I could do this. But I had no money, no connections, no experience, and I had no clue where to even begin. I took a long, hard look at the things I was passionate about and started to zero in on tech, specifically the Internet of Things, IT. It seemed like everything was moving toward a connected world. Smart homes, smart devices, smart everything. I started reading every article, blog, and white paper I could find about IT. I taught myself the basics of hardware, coding, and design. I had an idea that, at the time, felt like the most genius thing ever. A smart thermostat that would actually learn your preferences, not just set a temperature. Everyone was talking about energy-saving devices, and I thought, why not make a thermostat that could analyze your behavior patterns and adjust automatically? It wasn't just about saving energy, it was about making the device work for you in the most personalized way possible. My first prototype was laughable. It didn't even work as expected, but that didn't stop me. I kept improving it. I started reading about manufacturing, working out the logistics of prototyping, and figuring out the bare minimum I would need to launch. It was so far out of my comfort zone that every day felt like a battle. Every small victory felt huge. I learned how to use CAD software, spent hours tinkering with electronics, and even tried my hand at soldering. After about 6 months, I had a working prototype. I could hardly believe it. I knew it still needed a lot of work, but the idea was there, and I was hungry for more. The next step? Funding. I had no savings to fall back on, so crowdfunding was my only option. I spent weeks crafting the perfect campaign. I made a video where I explained the idea and showed off the prototype. It was far from perfect, but it worked. I reached out to anyone I knew who might be interested and asked for their support. Then I launched on Kickstarter. And nothing happened. No one was backing the project. I barely reached 10% of my funding goal in the first week. I remember feeling like an absolute failure. I'd worked so hard for months, and it felt like no one cared. It was crushing. I started doubting myself. Maybe I wasn't cut out for this. Maybe this was just a pipe dream. But I didn't give up. I decided to analyze what went wrong. I looked at my campaign again and realized I hadn't done enough to explain the problem I was solving. My messaging was too vague. So, I revamped my campaign page, re-recorded the video with a more clear, direct pitch, and really focused on how my product would make people's lives better, not just how cool it was. I also realized that I was missing out on an essential aspect of crowdfunding, social proof. So, I reached out to influencers in the tech space. I offered to send them early prototypes in exchange for reviews or shoutouts on social media. It was a gamble, but it worked. Slowly, but surely, the backing started rolling in. At the end of my campaign, I hit 200% of my funding goal. People were excited about my product. It wasn't just a dream anymore. It was a reality. I took the money and hired a small team to help with manufacturing and logistics. We found a manufacturer in China to help us build the first batch of units. The production process was a nightmare, filled with delays and quality control issues, but we kept pushing through. By 2017, we had a fully functioning product and started fulfilling orders. The first round of shipments was a blur of excitement and fear. What if the product didn't work as well as it had in the prototype stage? What if the customers were disappointed? Thankfully, the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. But that's when the real challenge began: scaling. We were a small team, and we didn't have the infrastructure to handle big orders. We had to find better partners for shipping, inventory, and customer service. Every new problem felt bigger than the last, and I often wondered how I was going to keep everything running smoothly. Despite the growing pains, the business began to take off. We reinvested every penny back into the company, improving the product, expanding our marketing efforts, and building our customer base. I knew we needed to get into retail to really grow, so I started reaching out to large retailers like Best Buy and Home Depot. After dozens of rejections, we finally got our first big break, a deal with Best Buy to stock our product in a limited number of stores. It wasn't a huge order, but it was enough to get us noticed. By the end of 2019, we were in hundreds of retail locations across the country. We'd also started building out our online presence, and our website was getting a lot of traffic. It was a wild ride, and every day felt like a new challenge. But the team I'd built was solid, and we had a shared sense of purpose to make the best damn smart home devices on the market. 2020 hit, and the pandemic threw everything into chaos. But instead of panicking, we adapted. We shifted our focus to e-commerce and quickly built out our online store. We also introduced new products, like smart plugs and lights, to help diversify our offerings. The pandemic accelerated growth in the smart home market, and by 2021, we had become one of the leading brands in the IT space. We'd raised multiple rounds of funding and were eyeing international expansion. Looking back, I never imagined how far I'd come. There were countless times when I doubted myself, when I felt like giving up was the only option. But I learned that entrepreneurship is all about perseverance and learning from failure. There's no secret formula. It's about showing up every day and doing the work, even when it feels like nothing is going your way. Today, my company is still growing, and we're working on new, innovative products that will continue to push the boundaries of what smart technology can do. It hasn't been easy, not by a long shot, but I wouldn't change a thing. My dream is now a reality, and it all started with an idea in a tiny garage. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.